Hello everybody and welcome to Revisiting Disney. This is the series in which every episode you guys suggest a attraction or restaurant or hotel or part of Walt Disney World, and then I sort of play armchair Imagineer and I try to think of a new design for the ride, whether it's replacing the ride system but keeping the theme, or replacing the theme but keeping the ride system. It's just a fun way to take attractions that we all know and love and think of them in new and interesting ways and try to break down why we love them so much. Today I'm taking a look at an attraction in Hollywood Studios that I've been putting off for a while because I wasn't sure how to approach it, and I think I know how I'm going to go with it for this video. This is actually an attraction that I think we can revisit multiple times, and that is the Great Movie Ride. Now, of course, the Great Movie Ride just received a refurbishment in May of 2015 because it's being sponsored by Turner Classic Movies. We're going to pretend that never happened for this video, and we're going to pretend I get to refurbish it. And like I said, there are multiple ways to go about it, but today I'm going to be revisiting it by replacing all of the movies in the attraction. It's still going to be about the movies. So you're going to see the big car going through scene by scene and end with a montage. That's going to stay the same. It's the movies themselves that are going to change, and maybe in the future we'll revisit it again and we'll just change up the whole theme entirely. And this was a fun one to do because I got to think about what movies I thought would be good for the attraction, and I got to think about what movies people would enjoy and that I love. And just to throw it out there from the beginning, this is all my opinion. You know, this isn't the right way to revisit the attraction. This doesn't mean I want to see it revisited this way. It's just for my fun. And I won't even wait till the end of the end of the video to pose this question, but I want to know what you guys would put in. Like, you get to replace all the movies in the Great Movie Ride. What movies would you pick and why? Leave it in the comments below. But before you do that, or while you think of that, here are my picks. Okay, so I set off with a basic set of rules, and the first rule was no Disney movies at all. I feel like there are enough places in the parks to enjoy attractions based on Disney movies. This is supposed to be about film in general, and so I avoided Disney. That said, I broke the rule once. There's one Disney movie in there, and I'll just say this, it doesn't feel like a Disney movie, even though it technically is. I also avoided properties that they own now, so that involves Star Wars and Indiana Jones and Marvel and things like that. The other thing, I tried to avoid Universal films just because we know that there's a Universal Studios, and for the fun of the game, we know there wouldn't be a Jaws scene in this. That said, I might have picked a couple of movies that have ties to Universals or are Universal Picture films that I just didn't know of, but whoops. It's my show. I get to do what I want. And we're going to kick off Rob's Great Movie Ride with The Sound of Music. And this is, I believe, arguably the oldest film in my list. I wanted something that represented musicals. And believe it or not, if you filter out Singin' in the Rain, you filter out Disney movies, you filter out things like Footlight Parade, and you try to think of something that's still culturally relevant, you don't have a whole lot left. So The Sound of Music really popped into my mind and was one of the first picks. And I think it's a great one. And it made me realize that part of picking these films should involve the visuals. And when you think of The Sound of Music, I think most everyone pictures that scene with, what's her name? The main character, of course, her name, I haven't seen the movie since I was a little kid, spinning around on the hilltop in that mountainous region, singing The Hills Are Alive with The Sound of Music. That's an iconic shot from the film, and I think that's the sort of thing that would be really cool to recreate in a Disney World attraction, to have the facade of the mountain region beyond, you know, the set piece, and to have the animatronics spinning around and singing. I think that'd be really cool to see, and that's why I would touch upon musicals with The Sound of Music. Next up, we go for a classic adventure action movie, and that is Dr. No, which I guess would, I don't know if Universal produced that or United Artists or MGM. I think MGM's got their hand on James Bond's intellectual property, but whatever. James Bond, I feel like, should be in this attraction. James Bond is such a classic franchise, and we have so many James Bond films now. I mean, we just have one coming out this fall. It is something that people young and old know about, and I think going back to the very first one would be a great way to sort of pay a tribute and to have a scene from Dr. No there. Again, going back to the visuals, I think sort of showing the internal of the secret base in the volcano. Again, this is another movie. It's been so long since I've seen it, but that's where Dr. No is, you know, working on, I forgot what he was working on. It was like a bomb or something. But just that scene, I think not only is a great image for James Bond, but great for that era of spy movie where you have the evil doctor who has a laboratory in the middle of a mountain, and that's just such a great aesthetic that I would love to see in this film, or in this ride about films. Next up, we go on to the crime genre, and I want to touch upon two movies in the crime genre. One of them is The Godfather. I think The Godfather is a classic film. Jumps a little bit forward in time there, but I think that is another one that has very iconic images. I try to think of movies where people know scenes, they know characters, and they know lines without ever having to have seen the movie, because they just are in part of our culture, our film culture so much. And I think The Godfather is one of them. I think just that image of Marlon Brando sitting in the chair with his jaws and doing his impression that I can't even do, I think is something that a lot of people know even before they see that movie. And I think that'd be a fantastic scene to recreate. The next crime movie that I think should go up there, that I actually just saw recently, that's a classic and I regret not seeing sooner, is The Warriors, the film that takes place in New York City about the gangs in New York. And that's another one where, the reason I saw that movie was because I know that line, Warriors come out and play, yay. Without ever having seen the movie, I knew that line, and I knew that film and that the vibe that film had, and I saw it, and it was a classic, and I think it'd be a great movie to throw back to here. Next, we move on to something a little more lighthearted, but still has that action pace to it, and that sort of movie that gets your blood pumping. And then this is another movie, and of course I'm biased by these picks, but this is another classic that I only saw recently that I love, and this is one that I think everybody knows a little something about, even if they haven't seen it, and that's Rocky. The movie with Sylvester Stallone as Rocky Balboa, the boxer. It is one of AFI's top 100 films of all time. And everybody knows, like, Eye of the Tiger or the Rocky theme and running up the steps and, yo, Adrian. And I think that'd be a cool scene. Again, the reoccurring theme here is these movies all have one scene or another that I would just love to see in person. And I think that's the appeal of a ride like this, is you get to place yourself in that movie for once. And for this, it would obviously be the end of the fight where, he's screaming, yo, Adrian, and he's looking for Adrian. And I think that'd be really cool, because you could have an Apollo Creed, and you could have Rocky Balboa, and you could have Mickey in the corner there. I think it'd be really great. And I think it'd be a good mood lifter from The Warriors. Next up, let's raise the mood a lot and step into a genre that I don't think The Great Movie Ride really touched at all. Although it picked movies that I think had it almost as a secondary genre, but that's comedy. Let's throw a comedy in there. And comedy, that's a tough one, because you could go way, way back and you get slapstick. You can get, Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, or you could do the Three Stooges, but you can move further up. You could do more modern comedy too. I picked comedy from the 80s because I think that's more of a era that I relate to. They're movies I see more often, and it is, I think, one of John Hughes' more classic films, and that's Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I think this would be a lot of fun. I think this is one that, people who are of an age where they're starting to become parents, they remember growing up with movies like this, and I think this would be a fun one to go back to. And if I guess I had to pick one scene to recreate for The Great Movie Ride from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, it would be the scene where they're in Cameron's father's garage at the very end. And I won't say anything more than that, because maybe you haven't seen it, and if you haven't, go see it. It's a classic, but that's the scene I would recreate. And you could get really interesting with the animatronics if you know the scene and you know what I'm talking about. And then we dip into my favorite genre, which is sci-fi. And in the original Great Movie Ride, that was one movie, and that was Alien. But for me, I picked 3 science fiction films, and there are 3 movies that I would love to see represented here. And the first one is Blade Runner with Harrison Ford. Classic movie. I think it's the movie I was trying to think of that most captured the vibe and era of, Alien, that worn-in feel of the future. That was something that was very new at that time in cinema. Star Wars sort of kicked it off. Before Star Wars, everything that took place in a sci-fi futuristic setting was very clean and crisp, and we always pictured the future to be very nice and, advanced. And Star Wars sort of began this trend that, well, no, things are going to be worn out and old and crusty in the future too, because they are today, and that doesn't change. And Blade Runner was a film that very much embraced that and had that noir feel to it that helped to add to that darkness. And I think it is a classic. And as for scenes for that, I think, one of the more iconic to recreate, even though it wouldn't necessarily be an exciting scene, would be either him when he's eating at one of the bars in the city, or when they're taking the test, the android test. And it does fantastic use of shadow and light that I think would be really fun to recreate in the Great Movie Ride. Next sci-fi movie that I want to jump into is post-apocalyptic, and it's Mad Max. Now, for those of you who just saw it, I do not mean Mad Max Fury Road. I mean Mad Max. I mean Mad Max, the first Mad Max. Maybe not, I don't know, Road Warrior, you can play with it. Any of the older Mad Maxes except the Thunderdome. And I mean, I think this is a given. This is such a visually beautiful series. I mean, not just one of them, all of them. That wasteland of a desert, the car, and just a lone man sort of walking alone. And I think that would be cool to recreate. I don't know how you'd go about doing it or what references you'd want to throw into that. You know, there's so much to draw from. Obviously, you'd want the car in there, and you'd want Max involved. But maybe you could have that flying vehicle from the second one. Maybe you could throw a reference to Thunderdome. Get a little animatronic Tina Turner in the background, I guess. But I think that's a cool series to throw back to that I think is very famous. And then the third sci-fi, and the one that breaks my Disney rule, Tron. And again, if you've seen it recently, no, I don't mean the new Tron. I mean the original Tron. Tron. And I think that's a no-brainer. That pushed a lot of boundaries when it came to the use of CGI in film. It certainly wasn't the first to use it, but I think it was the first to heavily use it. And I think it's iconic for that. And I think it's got a look that, again, you know, you talk to somebody on the street who's never seen Tron, they might not be able to explain the plot to you, but they know what Tron is. They know what they're visually thinking of, which is that, you know, dark grid with the glowing lights and the light cycles. And I think it would be cool to recreate that and to enter the grid in some form or another in a ride. I think would be a really cool experience, and that's why it would be on my list. Moving on from that, I did want to touch upon animation because, again, the original touches upon Fantasia. Now, this one was tough. To talk about a classic animation or a beloved animation that, you know, doesn't touch upon like Universal or Warner Brothers or like Disney is really tough. But this one actually, you know, has some connections with Disney because they did some distribution. And this one I don't think is as famous, but I think deserved the recognition. And I've mentioned it in other videos, and that is My Neighbor Totoro, the Miyazaki film. I think it was a gorgeous film. I think it approached animation in a way that's really unique that you don't see a lot in a lot of Disney animations, just in the sense that I think it puts more of a stress on almost like the atmosphere as opposed to plot. And I think that would be cool. And to me, the scene that I would love to see recreated, and I think would be really great, especially for this movie, is the bus stop scene, just because you get to build a giant, you know, don't make it like Fantasia. Fantasia, they just sort of projected stuff on the wall. That's boring. Create a scene. Make the bus stop, make a giant Totoro, make the little kids waiting at the bus stop, make it raining, make all of that. I think that'd be really fun. Again, it just comes back to that common theme of this is what I would love to put myself into at one point. And I think this ride could, you know, make a lot of these dreams happen. And then the final movie. In the original, we end it with The Wizard of Oz, a very classic fantasy film that I think will go down in history. And so I wanted to pick something a little more modern that is also a fantasy film that I think will go down in history for pushing boundaries and just being memorable. And that is, of course, Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, which I looked at it. It came out in 2001. That's a 14-year-old movie now. Boy. I remember seeing it in theaters, and I think this would be cool. And there's so many scenes that you can recreate, but I think the most famous one maybe to recreate would either do something in Hobbiton or do the scene where the Fellowship is formed. And that way you get the opportunity to create all of the animatronics. If you did Hobbiton, you're going to get Gandalf, and you'll get Frodo and Samwise. But if you do the formation, you get to do everybody. And you get to have that scene, and you get to have that speech as you ride through. And I think that'd be really fun and really cool. And of course, this refurbished version of the ride would involve a montage at the end. But I'm not going to go into the details of what movies would be in that because it would take forever, and I can't even begin to think. But it would just be a montage of just classic movies throughout time, you know, just throwing off some montage out there. Anyway, that is my idea for how I would refurbish the Great Movie Ride. Like I said at the beginning, I want to know what movies you would put into it. What genres would you want to see? What genres did you not see in this one or the original that you would love to see covered? And what films would you love to see yourself placed into through these attractions? Let me know in the comments below. Also, feel free to let me know on Twitter. I'm at RobPlays. I want to thank you all for watching. I want you to have a fantastic week. Whatever you're doing, make the most of it. And I hope to see you all next time for the next Revisiting Disney. Bye, everybody.